Here is a news commentary entitled, "Sustaining Democracy in Liberia Will Require a Credible National Elections Commission." The nomination of controversial individuals to high office in Liberia fits the mold of a long practice of the executive branch, shuffling through whoever they want, regardless of nationalistic purpose. Thus, the name the imperial presidency. The consequence of these nominations is the confirmation of incompetent individuals who contribute to the cycle of poor governance, which has stunted national growth for nearly 200 years in Liberia. The second branch of government, the national legislature, has a history of reckless enablement of the executive branch because together they manipulate governance, national resources, and incumbency for their own benefit. There is nothing wrong with politicking and winning the mandate of the governed. However, when the unholy collusion of the executive and legislature impacts the ability of the ordinary person to feel represented or benefit from national resources, it devolves into a recipe for social disorder and instability. Liberia knows too well this experience. Since its independence, the Constitution of Liberia gives the executive branch, especially the presidency, the power to make cabinet nominations, including that of autonomous commissions and agencies. Over the years, the president's power to nominate individuals to the country's elections commission often raised questions of integrity, independence, and qualifications of those often named to control, manage, supervise, and conduct the West African nation's presidential and legislative elections. The Constitution of Liberia is crafted along a Western democratic framework in which a citizen of 18 years and above vote directly to elect the president, vice president, members of the legislature, mayors of municipalities, towns, clans, and chiefs. However, and in particular, is the caliber of individuals who are nominated and confirmed to the country's electoral body, the National Elections Commission, the NEC, that demonstrates the reckless disregard for transparency, integrity, and commitment of the appointees to carry out their duties to ensure free and fair elections. This practice has propelled and crashed Liberia into intermittent civil crises, including the brutal bush war that resulted into the murder of over 250,000 people. Historically, the case in point that is being argued is relatively more recent. The Samuel Doe administration's appointment and the Senate's confirmation of Mr. Emmett Harmon to head the all too important National Elections Commission in the 1985 elections, the blatant and record rigging of the results of the election in favor of President Doe, and the attending social disorder of an attempted coup and subsequent ethnic conflagration and bloodletting were of no surprise. Today, the national legislature in Liberia, which is predominantly subservient to the executive, can be appropriately described as Liberia's national liability. They are the problem of Liberia, according to one of their own. With the exception of a handful of critical-minded lawmakers who are willing to challenge the excesses of the executive branch, the ruling Coalition for Democratic Change, the CDC-dominated legislature, rubber stamps nominations for the pleasure of the president and the coalition. Disappointingly, the public witnessed how members of the Liberian Senate rushed through the confirmation of some of President Weah's nominees to key positions without the necessary scrutiny and due diligence that the public anticipated. Undoubtedly, the rubber stamping of nominees has contributed considerably to the deficiencies and limited productivity in the current government, where competency is sacrificed for party and presidential patronage, which ultimately contribute to the collapse of efficiency, accountability, credibility, and transparency in the administration. It remains unclear if the propensity to rubber stamp nominees' confirmation or voting for passage of executive-friendly legislations are due to lack of knowledge of the role of the legislature by some of the lawmakers themselves, the desire to maintain party dominance, or both. Notwithstanding, all reasonable data points to both. With the appointment of a new slate of commissioners at the country's elections management body, the National Elections Commission, there is another opportunity for all senators, regardless of party affiliation, to be very diligent in the exercise of the oversight function of the executive in order to arrest the steady decline of the democratic trend during this Third Republic in Liberia. While we at the African Star and Liberia Public Radio heavily applaud what seems to be the singular, recent, intrusive, credible, and transparent bipartisan confirmation process of a former deputy defense nominee by the appropriate Senate committee in nearly 4 years, we urge the adoption of the same process for all nominees going forward to halt the deterioration of public trust and thereby restore public confidence in the confirmation process. Whether a senator represents the ruling coalition or the opposition bloc in the Senate, we remind them of their solemn oath which they took to execute their duties for country above party. There is no excuse for asking the right and hard questions about the qualifications, achievements, and record of nominees, especially for the National Elections Commission, because the cohesion and social stability of Liberia depend on the holding of credible, free and fair midterm and general elections. Above all, the Senate must confirm those members of the Commission with the highest qualifications, experience, expertise, and integrity to ensure that Liberians have a high level of confidence in the caliber of individuals who will fairly administer the process of elections at the National Elections Commission. African Star and Liberia Public Radio acknowledge that giving Liberians a credible elections commission that will oversee the midterm elections 2020, as well as the presidential and legislative elections in 2023, begins at the national legislature. At the same time, we at the African Star and the Liberia Public Radio will continue to use our platforms to enhance integrity and transparency in the confirmation process so that together, Liberia will have the best on the National Elections Commission, who will administer free, fair, and impartial elections for the sustenance of democracy in Liberia. We also challenge the civil society and the religious community, as well as all Liberians, to remain engaged and support a democratic Liberia for the benefit of the generation and the next. This African Star News Commentary is a collaboration with Liberia Public Radio entitled Sustaining Democracy in Liberia Will Require a Credible National Elections Commission.